Okay, so I'm just going to start off with asking you questions for this interview. Just warning you, I do have 4 dogs at my house. So if any of them bark, we'll just take a moment and we can always edit that out.
Okay, no problem.
So to start off with, could you please tell us your name and the year you acquired your physical therapy degree and from where?
My name is Beverly Schmoll. I got my bachelor's degree in physical therapy from Wayne State University in 1967. I was in the very first class at Wayne State University.
Wow.
And it was interesting because we started with 11 students and 5 of us graduated.
Oh, wow. That's a bit of a jump.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was quite interesting. A very different experience from what you're having, for sure. And I'll give you just a little bit of background. At the time, the physical therapy program was actually located in the College of Medicine. And so we took a lot of classes like anatomy, for example, with the medical students. They tried to make the best use of the resources. And the founder of the program was George Andrews. And the other faculty member was Jean Cuthbertson. And it was at a time when the health professions like physical therapy were just really, because of Medicare, we're really getting a lot of extra funding. So most of us actually received federal funds to help finance our education because there was really a shortage and they needed to have as many physical therapists as they could get at the time. And so most of our classes were all in the basement of what is now the Rehab Institute of Michigan. And so we were close to patients all the time, but we were always in the basement. We never knew what was going on outside. And the other thing that was interesting is women were not allowed to wear pants. So we went to class every day in a skirt with a top, and that was the dress code. And it was the dress code for therapists as well. They all wore dresses and, the white shoes and the patch on the sleeve and what have you. So it was a very different time. And you asked about women's rights. It turned out that in the first class, all 5 of us were women. None of the men made it. None of them were successful.
I love to hear that, but it's sad for the men, but that's great for us women.
Right. Yeah. But so all 5 of us were women. And 4 of us, I still know where we're at. One we lost along the way. She went to the South where her family actually was. And we lost track of her and never came across her again. And even though I was really very involved in the American Physical Therapy Association and went to a lot of meetings, just never came across her again. So I don't know if she even remained in the field. But 4 of us did. And we're still all alive, which that in and of itself is a pretty big deal. And so it was just an interesting time. And often when I think back about our education, there were many of the techniques that they taught at that point in time that you wouldn't dream of using today. In fact, you'll never hear about them because no one would, that just wouldn't be part of your education anymore. But one of the things that I always thought was really interesting, I had the good fortune of being able to meet and actually work alongside of many of the persons who were really kind of the pioneers in physical therapy. So Signe Brunstrom, for example, she actually came to the Rehab Institute and I worked side by side with her. Florence Kendall, who most of, I'm sure you still use her book or some version of something of it. But I had a wonderful conversation with her before she passed away. And I said to her, there's a lot of things today that we would never, ever do. I mean, because we know better, we've become evidence-based. We're really based on the science. That's all really good. But I said, in spite of the fact of my using things that we wouldn't use today, my patients still got better. So, that's kind of where the art and the science are a blend. And really, really important because a lot of what we do as physical therapists, first of all, we're given the privilege of touching, and it's really a privilege. There's very other health professions that touch as much as we do, and our patients allow us to do it. And so we always have to be very mindful of how important that is. But that touch is also very healing. And that's part of when we touch, and we do it in a therapeutic way, in a way that recognizes the dignity of our patients. We send to them a message that we value them as a human being, and we find them worthy. They're worthy of our time and our expertise, and we're there to help them have the best quality of life possible. And that actually is very therapeutic in and of itself. And sometimes we lose sight of that. So as we move forward, as important as the science of our profession is, it absolutely is, we have to also always remember that there's an art to it as well. And it's that special combination that makes the difference.
That's such great wisdom to impart on us, especially because the two of us are entering our final didactic semester, and then we will be going on full-time clinicals and only have a year left of school before we are full-time practicing clinicians. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as we impart on our clinicals and our working career. Absolutely.
Well, you know, one of the other stories I often share is a young therapist. You were asking about my career as a therapist, and my first job was actually at the Rehab Institute of Michigan. And while I was there, we also provided services at what was then called Women's Hospital, which was a separate entity. It's now part of the Detroit Medical Center, but it's combined with Harper Hospital and what have you. But anyway, it used to be located in a different place. And I can remember walking into a room with an elderly patient. She was in her early 90s. And the order had been to get her out of bed and get her walking with a walker. And so I walked in and, you know, as a young therapist, very cheerfully, hello, I'm Beverly Schmoll, I'm your physical therapist. And I said, I'm here to help you, you know, get out of bed and take a little walk. And she looked at me and she said, and this is just how she said, dearie, I do not have a single living relative or a single living friend. I have absolutely no reason to get out of this bed. So I paused, and you know, you're just, as a young therapist, you're just not expecting that response. I mean, you just really are not. And I noticed that there was a bedpan. And so I looked at her and I said, do you like using that bedpan? She said, no. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I can help you get out of this bed and we'll just get you to the bathroom here so that you don't have to use the bedpan anymore and you'll be able to use the toilet. And she paused for a moment and she said, that I'm willing to do. So that then was my lesson. You know, we talk about being focused on patients and their needs and what matters to them. And that wasn't part of the curriculum back in that day like it is now, okay? But that was my lesson, that at the end of the day, if you were really going to be helpful, you had to discover what it was that mattered to your patients, what really motivated them, what did they want to be able to do that they can't do now. And if you focused on that, it was going to be, you know, a much better interaction, and you were going to be much more successful in really helping them to achieve all they could achieve. And so she did get up on the walker and she did go to the toilet.
Oh, that's great. It's so different. I can't imagine a world in which we're not taught that information in our courses, because that's basically what all our courses center around currently.
Absolutely. Being patient-centered, right?
Absolutely.
But you know, back then we were not patient-centered. Nobody was patient-centered. It was all about whatever the practitioner thought was best for the patient, not what the patient really wanted to be able to do. And so that shift from being practitioner-oriented and centered to patient-centered was a big leap and a really important one. And we're much more successful as a result of it.
Absolutely. So you touched a little bit on your early career. Do you want to touch on your career with U of M?
Oh, sure. So after I was at the Rehab Institute of Michigan, I went on to actually work at Children's Hospital of Michigan. And that's when I decided to focus on pediatrics. And then from there, I worked in a public school setting. And while I was doing all of this, I went on to get my master's degree at Wayne State University. And then I moved from the Detroit area to the Flint area, and also had a daughter, and then decided that I wanted to go on and get my PhD. So I went to Michigan State University and earned my PhD. And that in and of itself was an interesting experience, because this just goes to show how times have changed. When I applied for the PhD program, my daughter was 2 years old. And my first advisor, a male, said to me, well, does your husband approve of your getting a PhD? And I can remember looking at him and saying, well, my getting a PhD really has nothing to do with my husband's approval. This is something I'm choosing to do. And I am quite confident that I can manage this program and also be a good mother to my 2-year-old daughter. I think we can make this work just fine. Subsequently, I can remember going to the chair of the department saying, that person is not going to be my advisor. That is just not going to work. I mean, he and I, we come from two very different worlds. It is just not going to happen. And this was in the 80s or late 70s. And at any rate, so I did get a different advisor. And then I also was linked with a woman who was also on the faculty at Michigan State and was part of a dual career family. And she had 2 sons. And she turned out to be a fabulous mentor. I mean, she was just absolutely wonderful and made all the difference in the world. But once I didn't get my PhD to go into academia. I mean, most people get it because they really want to be, in education. I got it because I was really interested in professional development. And so, and prior to that time, I did lots and lots of workshops and went all over the country doing different types of professional development programs. And then the physical therapy program moved from Ann Arbor to Flint. And Dick Darnell was the director. And bless his heart, he just recently passed away. And there were very few physical therapists at that time that had a PhD. I mean, we were a rare group of people. And so when he moved to Flint, he got in touch with me because he knew I had just gotten my PhD not long ago. And he said, oh, Beverly, you've got to be part of the faculty. I mean, we just really need you. And I said, well, okay, all right, I'll give it a try. You know, I mean, that's not what I had in mind to do, but I thought, okay, I will do it. Well, the students taught me a great deal, because very early on, my very first class I taught, I got the feedback from the students that she's too Madison Avenue, she's too razzmatazz. Well, when you're doing professional development programs, okay, with your colleagues, you have to be a little Madison Avenue razzmatazz. I mean, you just do. But for students, it was fatiguing. I mean, they just got exhausted. So I learned take it down a few decibels. And then things got much better. But I had a class, if you can believe this, that was at 8 a.m. on Monday mornings. And I used to come with toothpicks just as a joke and say to the students, well, here's toothpicks if we need to keep your eyes open. Because, after a weekend, they would come and kind of drag in. And so trying to keep them awake and alert and with it and excited, that was always a little bit of a challenge. So I joined the faculty actually in 1984. And Dick Darnell was the director. And then he went on sabbatical, and I was the acting director while he was on sabbatical. And then I think it was in 88 that I became the director. He decided he wanted to step down, and I became the director of the program. And it was an interesting time, because that's when we were making our transitions to a master's degree. And I had been, prior to that, president of the Michigan Physical Therapy Association, and had also been on the American Physical Therapy Association Board of Directors. So as we were making all these transitions, I had been part of all that political stuff. And so we made all those transitions at U of M Flint. And all of that went fine, went through accreditation, and did all those kinds of things. Expanded our class, expanded our faculty, and so forth. And U of M Flint at the time was also growing as an institution. And I always enjoyed it, because it was an institution where a lot of the students, I'm going to guess maybe probably 75% of the student body, were the first members of their family to go to college. And they were in a situation where they couldn't always go a long ways away. They needed to maybe stay closer to home or be able to commute or whatever. But we're really enthusiastic and eager and delighted to be there, and just a lot of fun to work with. And having been one of those same kind of students myself, the first in my family to go to college, I really could relate to that whole scenario. So I really enjoyed being with them. And so I did that until, what was it, 1993. And then they had a position available for research. And it was, I think, the director of graduate programs and research, something like that. And so I was tapped to do that. And then from that point on, I've been in higher education administration. And even though I did a little teaching here and there, one of the things that happens, unfortunately, when you get to that level of administration is you kind of lose the clinical aspects of whatever your discipline is, and really don't have time to engage in research anymore or those kinds of things. But I will say, while I was still in the Department of Physical Therapy, I did do a lot of research on carpal tunnel. And one of the things, Cindy Falzer and I put together a whole, which we actually copyrighted, a whole interview assessment tool to use with people to identify in the workplace what factors would contribute to carpal tunnel syndrome. And one of the places that we did interviews was at a plastics processing plant. And we did all 3 shifts. And so doing the midnight shift, and that was in and of it, that was just a trip and a half. But at any rate, so I had the most unusual things happen to me. So here I would be with these people in the midnight shift, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, interviewing them using this assessment tool and trying to get a sense of what their day was like and what they did. Well, I discovered a number of things. I discovered that this particular group of people loved to play darts. And so they would, before coming to work or depending on which shift they were on, or right after work, they would go to the bar and they play darts. Well, so they're doing this kind of thing over and over and over again. And then I had one of the workers say to me, because I'd asked about their hobbies and things that they like to do. And he all of a sudden jumps out of the chair and he starts walking across the room on his hands. And I just kind of looked and went, well, I could see why that might contribute a little bit to some of the problems you're having in your wrist. Okay, got it. It was those kinds of things. It was a real eye opener into a whole different culture, really in lifestyle of this group of people. So, of course, we discovered it wasn't just a matter of what people did at work. You really had to look at their whole being to see what the factors were that were really contributing to carpal tunnel syndrome.
That is quite an interesting experience. I don't know how I would fare interviewing individuals at 2 a.m. or around midnight. I don't think my brain would exactly work.
I know. Well, I'm not that kind of a night person at all. So I'd have to take a nap beforehand, take a nap afterwards. I was just a zombie for a while. But there's another story I do want to share with you.
Go ahead.
And that is that while I was at Children's Hospital of Michigan, this was in the early 70s. And it was the time when, we go through phases with fashion. And that was, again, when we had the short skirts, the mini skirts and all that kind of stuff. And so, and we were still nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists. We all wore dresses, okay, the white dresses, the white shoes. And I can remember one weekend going to a uniform shop. And lo and behold, if they didn't have, in the usual uniform material, in white, a pantsuit. So it had pants and it had this tunic top and this little tie. And I thought, oh man, that is perfect. Because when you're in pediatrics, you spend a lot of your time on the floor. That's just what you do, or on mats, And so here I had been in these short little white dresses, crawling around on mats and whatever, who knows, but at any rate. So I thought, well, this is just the ticket. I mean, this solves it. I'll look professional. I'll be in my white uniform, but I can crawl around on the mats and I don't have to worry about it. That would be great. So on a Monday morning, I went in with my white pantsuit. And I wasn't in the hospital for an hour when I get a call from the vice president, Mr. Lowry. And he asked me to come to his office. And I still did, every once in a while he'd ask me to come down for something. And I still didn't think too much about it. So I walked in and he looked at me and he said, "Beverly, you're wearing a pantsuit." And I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "Thank God." I said, "You know how it is. I'm crawling around on the floor, got all this stuff." I said, "Finally, they've got uniforms that are pants. So, I don't have to worry about the modesty thing and all the rest of it. And I can do what I really need to do with the kiddos." And I said, "I am just so delighted they finally did this." And he looks at me and he said, "Beverly, my phone has been ringing off the hook. Every nurse in this building wants to know why you get to wear pants and they don't." And I just kind of looked at him. And what happened that day was the dress code for what is now the Detroit Medical Center changed. And from that point on, women could wear pants. That's probably my greatest contribution.
I thank you for that contribution, because I can't imagine moving around in a skirt or a dress when working with patients either. And I'm glad you brought that story up, because when I was doing my research, I saw that story and I was going to ask you about it if you hadn't brought it up.
Yeah.
That's really a really amazing contribution, honestly, because I'm sure all of my classmates can't imagine what it would be like, even just attending lab wearing skirts or dresses.
I know. When we did labs, we were allowed to wear a bathing suit. I mean, that's how we dealt with it. But that's what we had to do. We had to wear a bathing suit. Times have changed a whole lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's pretty much all of the questions I had to ask. So we do have a bonus question in which, again, I was doing some research. And what made you interested in traveling to every continent?
Oh, well, first of all, I had traveled to all 50 states.
Okay.
And so, I was able to travel to all 50 states because of my work with the American Physical Therapy Association and also with the Commission on Accreditation in Physical Therapy Education. So I was a commissioner, and then I was a on-site team leader. So did lots of accreditation visits. So those kinds of things take you to all kinds of places that you otherwise would never have reason to go to. So I ended up being in some states I might not have otherwise been in. And then my husband and I, he also has traveled extensively. He was actually Dean of Pharmacy at the University of Michigan. So we both bring an academic background at this point. But in the course of events, we realized that together we've been to all of the continents except for Antarctica. And it's kind of interesting. Once you realize that you only have one left to go, you just say, well, might as well do it, And most of the people that were on the trip were the same as we were. I mean, they'd been to the other 6 continents and said, okay, let's do all 7. And I will just say, Antarctica is, it's such a unique place in the world. I don't know if you've been watching any of the Patagonia special on CNN. They're doing a whole episode. You don't have time to do that stuff now, but when you're retired, you do. But it's extraordinarily pristine. And when you go to Antarctica, I mean, there are no hotels, there are no restaurants. There's nothing. There's just nothing. It's ice and snow and penguins and sea lions, and huge icebergs and blue ice, which is just vivid and gorgeous. And the icebergs take on all different kinds of formations. And each day we would go from our ship on a Zodiac and then go to the land. And you always had a wet landing because that's just the way there's no shore. You don't have a beach like we think about beaches. Okay. So you'd have these big boots on and you'd get out and you big parka and all this stuff. And then you'd go walking around and talk to the penguins, whatever. But it turned out to be and there's lots of history associated with Antarctica in terms of explorers and things like that. So it turned out to be a really interesting trip. So we just thought, well, all 50 states and all 7 continents. That just seemed, we had it as a goal and did it.
That's definitely interesting. So since we've come to the conclusion of all of our questions, is there any other stories or information you would like to add so that we're aware of, or?
Well, I know one of the other things you asked me about was being the interim chancellor at U of M.
Oh, yeah.
And returning to Wayne State. Yeah, it was interesting to be the chancellor at the University of Michigan, and one of the things that was unique about it was it turned out that myself and all of the vice chancellors were women. Really, again, unusual. And I can remember being, and that just happened happenstance. It wasn't like it was planned or whatever. But I can remember being out and about in the community, and someone, would mention, oh, all the leadership is women, and I'd say, yeah, just as in the past, all the leadership was male. And that all I'd had to do is say that, and that shut that conversation down. It's like, you shouldn't be surprised. We're perfectly capable of doing these things. But I was the first woman to lead U of M, Flint. And so that was kind of a unique circumstance to be in, and really did enjoy it, actually. And then I had an opportunity to go to Wayne State University. And of course, that's my alma mater. And it's a very special experience to return to your alma mater as an administrator, especially as a dean, because one of the deans spend a lot of time out and about, and interacting with alumni and donors and people in the community and all those kinds of things, and that's an aspect of it that I really did enjoy doing. But I would be able to relate to the neighborhoods where people grew up, and all those kinds of things. So that really was very, very fun. And I still have a close association with Wayne State University, and really do enjoy that. And then I went to the University of Toledo, and the reason I went to Toledo was because it was a rare opportunity that you almost never get in higher ed. The University of Toledo merged with the Medical College of Ohio, so two institutions merged. When they created that merger and created a new University of Toledo, now with an academic health science center, they had none of the colleges overlapped, except for both the University of Toledo and the Medical College of Ohio had health science colleges. One was health and human services, the other was health science. And so what the merger required was those two colleges had to be merged. And what made that unusual was, one, they were located in two separate places, two different campuses. So eventually wanted to get them into one. One was part of a collective bargaining unit, had a union. The other did not. So the cultures of these two institutions were like night and day. I mean, they had nothing in common. I mean, it was really, really fascinating. So I was hired to merge those two colleges and to bring them together. And that's kind of an unusual circumstance to find yourself in. I did it, and we were successful, and we got them all to the same place and made all the things happen and what have you. But it was a rare opportunity and a rare challenge, which I just felt like I couldn't pass up. So that's why I left Wayne State. Otherwise, I mean, I loved being there, but and I liked being in a large institution. But the University of Toledo has about 23,000 students, and that really is a really nice size institution. It's not too big, not too small. It's just kind of about the right size. So I really enjoyed doing that too. So I was really fortunate to have lots of different experiences and to meet lots of people across the country, and can look back and feel good about all the things I was part of.
Yeah, it sounds like you were quite the trailblazer throughout your career. So it's really great to be able to talk to you and learn about all of your experiences.